Okay, so this will hopefully be the last video of this series. So what we want to look at are the final episodes of the Tanker War, and this is going to be kind of really the conclusive reason why the war is going to end. So Kuwait asked the Power Five countries of the Security Council to reflag their tankers to provide safety, just kind of as a, hey, we're getting attacked, let's see what they can do. The Soviet Union actually agreed to this. So what this did is it put pressure on the United States to also agree to this so that they would also have a presence in the region as well. So in order to protect these reflagged ships, so that meant that the tankers that used to be Kuwaiti tankers now were United States tankers because they renamed them and whatnot. So the United States sent its naval ships to the region to kind of protect these ships, since it was kind of the policy of the United States that it would protect ships that it has flagged. So despite an incident where an Iraqi pilot accidentally shot and attacked a United States ship, the United States becomes firmly on the Iraqi side and protects Iraqi interests in the region. So with these tankers reflagged, the United States is taking direct action on convoys and it's usually special forces in the Gulf region. So these special forces would attack Iranian ships, and they were some of the first to use night vision goggles, actually. The main Iranian defense at this point would be sea mines. So they put mines out in the sea and try and hope that ships would actually hit these mines. So after the United States had attacked a few oil installations to show its might, the Iranians starts attacking Kuwaiti positions, which means that the Kuwaitis are finally going to allow the United States to put barges in Kuwaiti waters to assist in the region. So this is going to create a firm foothold of the United States presence in the Gulf, starting in 1987. So over the last few months of 1987, the two sides, the Iranians and Iraqis, they're going to start, instead of hitting tankers as frequently, they're going to start to play with the Soviet and United States warships in the region. So that's who they're going to start to attack, which is going to lead to the United States announcing that it would extend its protection over all maritime traffic in the Gulf region, and that they were authorized to use military force against any Iranian ships that were attacking Iraqi interests. So in 1988, in July, the U.S. knew its newest ship, the USS Vincennes, was in the region. And this was a brand new ship. In fact, the crew didn't really know how to use it very well. It had, the highest technology, the latest technology, and they didn't quite know how to use it. So an overambitious commander kind of got in a little bit of a duel with Pasdaran gunboats. So the Pasdaran had gunboats that were attacking, and they started pursuing these gunboats. And they got off course and eventually got into Iranian waters. They got further away than they really wanted to. And they happened to get in the flight path of Iran Air Flight 655. They had no idea that they were in the flight path. They really didn't know that they were in Iranian waters. So what had been happening is Iranian airplanes would come and attack the ships. And that was kind of their main way that they could attack U.S. ships, was through Air Force. And they didn't really have the radar technology to really figure out whose side each plane was. So therefore, as they had this airplane coming into their radar, getting into 20 nautical miles, they try, calling through the radio sign, but they didn't realize that it was a commercial aircraft, and they weren't able to identify it. So what they did is they fired a missile towards this airplane, and they ended up killing all 290 people on board this aircraft flying from Tehran to the UAE. So what this meant, so despite it being a huge tragedy of killing civilians, this incident made the Iranians realize that they couldn't take on the United States and Iraq at once. They see the United States as doing whatever it needed to do to win this war for Iraq. So here's a description of it's trying to take off from the UAE to Tehran. It should have been a 30-minute flight, but they go in through Iranian territorial waters, and this is where the missile, the surface-to-air missile, shoots down this plane. So at this point, the Iranian leaders, they get together and they realize that the government's pushed too far. This war's been going on for too long, and that the people are just no longer behind it. From the land victories to the United States shooting down a civilian aircraft, they realize that they're probably going to have to accept Saddam Hussein's proposal of a ceasefire, where they just kind of go back to how everything was before the war, and that they needed to get the Ayatollah to accept it. So eventually, the Ayatollah who's in charge of the military, Rafat Shashani, publicly announces withdrawal, and Iran finally accepts the terms of the United States or the UN Security Council Resolution 598. We'll talk more about peace operations and the United Nations peace resolutions in another PowerPoint. So at dawn of August 20th, 1980, so a month before 8 years of this war, a ceasefire is official. And what basically happens is the front goes back to the international border that it was before the war started in 1980. And there's a UN-mandated peacekeeping force that's kind of along this ceasefire line. And the fighting is finally over. So the extent of the losses on both sides kind of exaggerate how many people were killed, saying that, a lot of historians at that time said it was about 1 million people dead. However, after better consideration, it's probably closer to about 680,000 people dead, with 180,000 of those being Iraqi troops and about 500,000 being Iranian troops being killed, with 1.5 million people being wounded or maimed for life. So the reality of the fighting is that there was actually more lulls in combat where they're not actually fighting than actual combat. So they're actually, physically clashing maybe 25% of the time. So maybe a quarter of the time they're actually fighting. So this is significantly less than if you look at, World War I, which is what it's compared to, or World War II, where they're fighting considerably more than 25% of the time. Compared to World War I, which is the most similarly compared to war, where each country lost about 4% of their population over a 4-year war, this war only saw 1.3% of the population lost over the 8-year war. So about 1% of all the population between Iraq and Iran was killed during this war. And the financial cost is perhaps the biggest thing, where it's estimated at $1.1 trillion, and those are 1988 dollars. So it's, today's dollars, it would be considerably more than that, with 40% of the cost being from Baghdad and 60% coming from Tehran. And the reason Tehran had to spend more is that they had to actually pay for weapons, whereas Iraq was able to buy from credit, and Iran had to pay higher prices for their weapons because people realized that nobody else really wanted to trade with them. So therefore, they were able to charge more. So the few countries that did trade with Tehran, with Iran, they jacked up the prices. So that's the extent of this PowerPoint. We'll look at other factors of the war with other videos, which you can look forward to seeing soon.